Welcome to Revenge with Lyra.
My name is Madeline Hayes. I'm 32 years old, and this is how betrayal became the blood in my veins. It started with a lie, a cruel, deliberate lie. My parents stood in the kitchen, tears in their eyes, voices trembling as they said, "We're broke. We have nothing left. We can't help you, Maddie." I believed them. I clutched my husband's medical bills in my hands, $47, $800 for the surgery that would keep him alive, and I begged for just a fraction. They shook their heads. "We wish we could." But the truth? They weren't broke. Not even close. They had simply decided I wasn't worth saving. Because days later, I found out where the money had gone. My money, the savings I had hidden away for his operation. They funneled every dollar into my sister's so-called modeling career. $50,000 for glossy photo shoots, fake managers, and a dream that collapsed before it even began. When my husband asked why the hospital kept calling, I lied to protect him. I told him it would be okay, that I had it handled. But at night, I broke apart in silence, replaying the betrayal over and over. The humiliation, the abandonment, the way they looked at me like I was a burden, while she was their golden child worth every gamble. Tell me, what happens when the people meant to protect you become the ones who strip you bare? That's the question that haunted me for years. Until the day everything turned. Because years later, when the tables flipped and my name was finally written in gold, when the world knew me, when the checks had more zeros than I could count, those same parents came crawling back. But instead of the desperate daughter they remembered, they found someone else. Someone colder. Someone who had learned that betrayal is best answered not with screams or tears, but with silence sharpened into strategy. And that's exactly what I gave them. A lesson they'd never forget. The phone calls still ring in my memory. The hospital, the insurance office, the specialists reminding me the clock was ticking. Every time the phone lit up, my chest tightened. My husband, Daniel, didn't notice the panic in my eyes. He was too busy fighting his pain with a smile, still making bad jokes, still calling me Maddie girl like nothing was wrong. He didn't know the surgery date had slipped through our fingers. He didn't know the money was gone, and I couldn't bear to tell him why. Because how could I? How could I look into his tired blue eyes and confess that my own parents had stolen his lifeline, that they had poured every dollar into my sister, Vanessa, the golden child with cheekbones sharper than her conscience? The night I found out, I drove past the studio they'd rented for her. Lights blazed inside. Photographers circled her like she was royalty. And there on the floor was one of my own savings envelopes, torn open, the cash scattered like props. I wanted to scream, to kick the doors down, to drag her out by the hair and demand she tell the truth. But I didn't. I sat in my car until the tears dried and a colder part of me was born. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. My parents weren't broke. They weren't desperate. They were deliberate. They had chosen her over me. And as Daniel's condition worsened, more hospital visits, more medications we couldn't afford, I carried that choice like poison in my veins. When Vanessa's career crashed 2 months later, my parents still shielded her. She tried, they said. She just needs more time. Time Daniel didn't have. The day the doctors told me his chances were fading, I locked myself in the bathroom and punched the sink until my knuckles bled. Not because I was weak, but because I swore to myself that if Daniel didn't make it, if their selfishness cost me the one good man I'd ever had, then my parents would live long enough to regret it, deeply. And years later, when fortune turned and I rose from those ashes, I remembered every tear, every bill, every lie, and I knew the lesson was waiting. Theirs, not mine. The morning Daniel collapsed, I knew my world was about to split. He was making coffee, humming that same off-key tune he always did, when suddenly his legs buckled beneath him. The mug shattered against the tile. His body hit the floor with a sickening thud. I screamed his name until my throat burned. The ambulance lights painted our street red, neighbors peeking through curtains while I rode beside him, clutching his hand like it was the last rope keeping him tethered to me. At the hospital, I begged. I begged the doctors, the insurance clerk, the surgeon. Please, please, just give us time. I'll find the money. I'll find it. But time doesn't wait for the broke and betrayed. Daniel was stable for the night, but the surgeon's eyes told me the truth. Without the operation, we were running out of hours, not days. That night, I called my parents again. My voice shook, but my words were sharp. You have the money. You took it. You stole it from me. Give it back. Please. My mother's reply? Cold, rehearsed. It's gone, Madeline. Don't make this harder than it already is. I wanted to believe she felt guilty, but her tone was flat, almost annoyed, as if my husband's life was an inconvenience to her. When I hung up, I looked at Daniel lying in that sterile hospital bed. Machines beeped around him. Tubes tangled in his arms. He looked peaceful, almost childlike. He trusted me, trusted that I'd protect him. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Not the kind of break that leaves you weak, but the kind that hardens into steel. If love couldn't make my parents human, then their betrayal would make me ruthless. Daniel squeezed my hand faintly in his sleep, and I whispered a vow he couldn't hear. If I lose you, they will lose everything. When the monitor beeped louder and nurses rushed in, I wasn't surprised. My tears fell silently, because part of me already knew this was the night I became someone else. Someone who would build an empire, not to shine, but to make sure the ones who left me in the ashes would one day choke on the dust I rose from. Daniel didn't make it. The words came like a blade, simple, final, merciless. The doctor's lips moved, but I only heard the echo. We did everything we could. I stood frozen, staring at the white sheet they pulled over him, while my body screamed to collapse. But I didn't. I couldn't, because I already knew who killed him. Not the illness, not the lack of medicine, but my parents, who bled me dry for Vanessa's dream and left Daniel gasping for time that never came. At the funeral, my mother dabbed fake tears with a silk handkerchief while my father shook hands like it was a business meeting. Vanessa wore black designer sunglasses, whispering to her friends in the back row like she was at a fashion show. They thought I'd break down, that I'd crumble under grief. But grief didn't shatter me. It sharpened me. Every condolence, every hollow hug carved the vow deeper inside me. I will not forgive. I will not forget. I sold Daniel's things quietly, paid off the remaining hospital debt, and vanished into the grind of survival. I took double shifts, swallowed humiliation, and poured every ounce of pain into building something greater than all of them. Years blurred. I climbed rung after rung until my name was whispered in rooms my parents could never enter. Deals closed, checks stacked, and the zeros multiplied until I stopped counting. Meanwhile, Vanessa's face disappeared from magazines. Her career was a ghost no one remembered. My parents? Their wealth began to erode, investments soured, their golden daughter, unable to shine them out of debt. And then came the inevitable, the knock at my office door. My secretary leaned in. There's an older couple here. They say they're your parents. I smiled. For the first time in years, a real smile crept across my face. They had come crawling. The same lips that once told me they were broke. The same hands that signed away Daniel's chance at life were now reaching out to me. And I was ready, because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's served in silence, with a glass of water you never pour and a chair you never offer. And that was just the beginning of what I had planned. They walked into my office looking smaller than I remembered. My mother, once the queen of every charity gala, wore a faded coat with fraying seams. My father's tie hung loose, his shoulders bent beneath debts they couldn't hide anymore. And Vanessa wasn't with them. Of course she wasn't. Golden children vanish when the shine fades. Madeline, my father began, his voice cracked but still reaching for authority. We're in a difficult spot. Some investments went bad. We just need a loan. Temporary, of course. You understand. Alone. That was the word he chose, as if he hadn't stolen the one thing money couldn't buy back, Daniel's life. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch until my mother fidgeted with her purse. Finally she spoke. Please, darling. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. Vanessa is struggling. We might lose the house. The house, their shrine of polished wood and glass, the one they'd built like a palace for their perfect daughter. They wanted me to save it. I almost laughed. Instead, I folded my hands and asked softly, Do you remember the night I begged you for Daniel's surgery money? They froze. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came. My father cleared his throat. That was different. We didn't have. Stop. My voice sliced through the room. You had money. You had my money. And you chose her. You let him die. Their eyes dropped, but I didn't let them escape the weight of my words. I worked 3 jobs to breathe life into a man who deserved to live, and you poured it all into broken dreams and designer gowns. So no, I won't give you a loan, but I will give you something else. My mother looked up, hopeful. What is it? I leaned forward, my tone ice calm. A lesson. Their brows furrowed, confused. I pressed the intercom. Send in Mr. Lane. My attorney walked in, holding a folder thick with documents. I slid it across the desk toward them. Inside were papers, quiet, devastating papers, detailing how the remnants of their estate, their accounts, even Vanessa's failed investments, were no longer theirs to control. Because over the years, while they ignored me, I had been watching, waiting, and buying every crumb of their collapsing empire right out from under them. My mother's gasp filled the room, and my father's voice broke on a single word. You! I smiled. Yes, me. My father's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. Each line, each signature, each quiet transaction told the story. Their untouchable fortune was gone, absorbed into my companies, my shell accounts, my carefully orchestrated web. You can't do this, he whispered, the last shred of authority clinging to his voice. I leaned back, unblinking. I already did. My mother clutched his arm, tears smudging the mascara she'd once prided herself on perfecting. Madeline, we're your family. Blood is blood. You can't just abandon us like this. Family. The word twisted inside me, sharp and bitter. Daniel had been family, and they abandoned him in a hospital bed with tubes in his arms. I was family, and they turned my pain into funding for Vanessa's vanity. You taught me what family means, I said softly. It means sacrifice for the chosen one, silence for the rest. I just learned to play the game better than you did. My father slammed the folder shut. What do you want from us? Money? Apology? I shook my head slowly. I don't want anything. That's the point. You came here, thinking I'd save you. But I came prepared to watch you drown. My attorney cleared his throat and slid another document across the table. Per Ms. Clark's instructions, foreclosure proceedings begin next month. Unless, he looked at me for confirmation. I gave a thin smile. Unless I decide otherwise, which I won't. Their faces paled. For the first time, I saw my parents as they really were, not giants towering over me, not flawless rulers of my childhood, but fragile people stripped bare, scrambling for mercy. I rose from my chair and circled slowly around the desk until I stood between them. My mother tried to reach for my hand. I let hers hang in the air. You once told me I was worthless, I whispered. Tonight, when you leave this office, I want you to carry this truth with you. The stain you thought I was is the only mark left standing. My father's jaw tightened, but his eyes betrayed him. Shame, anger, and fear battling in silence. I walked to the door and opened it wide. Security will see you out, I said simply. They didn't argue. They couldn't. And as their footsteps faded down the marble hallway, I finally felt what I had been chasing for years. Not joy, Not even triumph, but balance. The scales had shifted, and the weight was no longer on me. The news spread faster than I expected. Within days, whispers about my parents' downfall seeped into every corner of the community they once ruled. The couple who donated lavishly to galas, who smiled for magazine covers, who mocked me at holidays for being ordinary, were suddenly exposed as broke, powerless, and abandoned by the daughter they'd crowned golden. And Vanessa? She had already fled. When the modeling agencies closed their doors on her, so did her so-called friends. She was last spotted working tables in a dim restaurant 2 towns over. Her dream, reduced to serving coffee, she once swore she'd never touch. Meanwhile, my phone rang off the hook. Old acquaintances, reporters, even family friends, all asking for comments, for statements, for truth. I gave them none. Instead, I released one quiet press announcement under my company's name. Effective immediately, Clark Enterprises has acquired full control of the Whitmore estate, including all associated assets and holdings. The same people who once laughed at me, who watched as my parents humiliated me in public, were now forced to read those words. I walked through the city that night and saw faces turn, whispers following in my wake. But unlike before, there was no pity, no ridicule, only awe. And still I wasn't finished. At the next charity auction, the same event where my mother had once mocked me for wearing a borrowed dress, I made my entrance. The chandeliers sparkled, the cameras flashed, and every eye turned as I walked the marble floor in a gown of midnight silk. The host announced, "Our lead sponsor tonight, Ms. Madeline Clark." Gasps rippled through the room. I smiled, lifting a glass as the lights shifted, projecting my company's name in gold across the stage backdrop. In the corner, I caught the sight of my parents, smaller, seated near the back, clutching their empty hands like lifelines. For a moment, our eyes met. My mother's lips parted, trembling with words she would never dare speak aloud. My father lowered his gaze, unable to face what he'd created. And me? I turned away, calm, untouchable, because the greatest revenge wasn't their poverty. It was this, standing in the spotlight they once denied me, unashamed, unstoppable, while they faded quietly into the shadows. The night ended with applause, the sound rolling like thunder against crystal glasses and velvet walls. I stood at the center, calm in a way I'd never known before, every eye watching the woman they once dismissed. And yet, inside, I wasn't gloating. I wasn't hungry for more. I was free, because revenge, real revenge, isn't about destroying others, it's about reclaiming yourself. As the final speech closed, I slipped away to the balcony. The city stretched beneath me, alive with lights, each one a story, a second chance, a reminder of how far I'd come. A hand brushed against my shoulder. It was Daniel's old doctor, the one who had tried desperately to save him. He looked at me with quiet pride. "You've built something extraordinary," he said. "Daniel would be proud." The words pierced me deeper than anything my parents had ever said. Proud, the one word I had begged to hear growing up, and now it came not from them, but from the life I had rebuilt myself. I closed my eyes, and for a fleeting moment I felt Daniel's presence, not as a shadow of loss, but as a quiet strength in my bones. My parents never approached me that evening. Perhaps they finally understood. I wasn't the daughter they could bend, break, or use anymore. I was beyond their reach. The last time I saw them, they were leaving the gala, shoulders slumped, swallowed whole by the silence of their own making. And me? I walked back into the ballroom, head high, laughter spilling effortlessly from my lips as I rejoined the world that had once turned away. Because this was no longer about revenge. It was about reclamation. The girl they tried to erase had become the woman who rewrote the story. And for the first time it was mine, entirely mine.